I'm back. Today I want to take a look at some of the Chinese stuff. Well, what's this? Tony said he'd never get another one. I lied. So I bought another one. Yeah. Well, it's for review, of course. Is it any good? Well, that's the question a lot of people have always asked. And if you go onto Fractal's website, the fractalaudio.com website, not the .co.uk because I own that one. Yeah, it says here it's a product for every player. The Fractal audio system includes 3 different products, each built for the same industry-leading amp modelling, speaker cab simulation, effects and more. Well, we're going to get into all of that, but of course, first of all, in all of my inside and outside reviews, we're going to take a look at what's inside this. And that's got an even higher emphasis on it than it used to in the previous Fractal audio equipment videos that I made before. Well, why is that? Well, last time I took a look at Fractal audio, what they used to do was to import parts that were made in Hong Kong, and they imported them via sea, because I found the tickets, and in they came to wherever Fractal audio is, and then they started assembling and messing about like that. Well, that's one way of doing things. But of course, it appears that didn't work. Because they'd had problems with, well, in my opinion, they'd had problems with actually the internal quality of the product on XFX2 and XFX3 that I looked at. They both had these sort of funny problems. So maybe they decided that, well, maybe it's best to let somebody else build the product. Maybe. They don't talk to me. But that's one of the things we're going to be talking about and discussing a bit later in the video. But as always, like I said, most importantly and firstly, we've got to see the quality inside this thing and exactly what chips are in there and whether we're being hoodwinked or we aren't. Because people are like that, you know. Manufacturers sometimes, well, they don't always like you to have a look inside, do they? Neither do their cohorts. Anyway, let's not worry about them for now. Let's go and take a look inside this unit, and I'm sure that there are an awful lot of people would like to take a look inside, especially if you don't own one and you might be considering one. This is the FM3. There is an FM9. The only real difference from what I can see is there's 6 extra buttons, and I've got that covered later on. And of course the XFX3, which is twice the price of this one. But they do claim that most of everything is sort of similar. You get a bit extra I/O and stuff like that. Anyway, enough of that for now. Let's get in there. Rock and roll. Well, here you go. That's just a sort of quick shot of what it's like on the top. We've got a few bits on the side. We've got a few cooling holes on each side. They're the same on the other side, by the way. We've got some I/O on the back. Let's not worry about that for now either. Oh, there you are. Well, here we are for the first time, taking a look inside the FM3 that has been assembled, from what I can see, in China. In fact, it says made in China on the cardboard box. Yeah, which says a lot really, but more about that later. So let's take a quick look around the internal bottom main board. Just a quick look. We'll mention a couple of chips and then talk about the chips a bit later on, just to see what we're actually buying. Because, well, I was going to make a website called can'tbetrusted.com, but somebody's already got it. What a pity. So let's take a look at what's going on. First of all, we've got the typical Shark, well, they use that name, analog devices, which Shark processor has been around forever. Maybe this is an older one as well, or not. Bearing in mind they only made this unit about 10 months ago, I mean, what can I say? It might be a brand new one 10 months ago, or it might be some old thing that's been updated. But it's basically, it's an ADSP SC 587 with a load of other numbers underneath, which no doubt we're going to get to have a look at later on. Well, what else have we got? Well, as you can see down there, we've got these two tiny little chips. There they are, just below the processor. And those are 2WK17 D9P, looks like TK. And again, more about them a bit later. They'll be memory. Well, what else is there? Oh yes, the power supply. This tiny little unit over here. You can see it. It's a third-party bought-in device. And that one's made by a company called Meanwell. Well, I hope they do mean well. Because if they don't mean well, let's face it. It's a sort of, well, cheapish power supply that will have cost, I could be pretty sure, probably less than $10. Yeah, they sort of that money even today. I mean, I buy power supplies from a sort of company I've known a long time, and they're at least as good as that one for about $10, US dollars, by the way. It's pretty much like you saw in the XFX2 and the XFX3. Those were also bought-in power supplies, and yeah, you get what you get, I suppose. Next, yeah, one of my favourites actually. It's the input power. It's up here. Because on the older devices, this thing was held in place, or contributed to be held in place, with silicon. On this one, they've actually cut it right, and it fits, and there's no silicon. Well, you know, we could talk about that. Well, we're going to talk about that a bit later on, but there is bits and pieces behind that too that most people wouldn't talk about, but I'm going to. Bit later on. They have on the I/O. This is looks to me like MIDI in and out or through. And there it is. It's got its little board, which I like to see that because, well, in the worst scenario, when these things wear out or whatever it is they do with them, it might become obsolete before they wear out. Who knows? At least you can unconnect it from here and remove it, and well, either make a new one or ask Fractal Audio in 7 years whether they've still got some that they can supply, which, well, who knows? You need to ask them. And so on and so forth. But it is modularised, and that's important. Well, we're in the same sort of area over this left-hand side. I mean, you've got to look at that down there, haven't you? Yeah, that little fan there. Yeah. Well, there's not much I can really say about that fan, except it's made by Top Motor, whoever they are, and it's made in China, and it's probably about, I don't know, $2 or $3, maybe, probably. Not more you can say about that, is there? It is what it is. It's DC 12 volts, by the way, and it takes 0.7 of an amp to operate. Let's hop over this side, and you can see this is for the phones and for the input, and it's got a little board attached to it if you look carefully, and the connectors off that will come down to this this thing down here. Nothing wrong with that. Now as you look generally around this board, I mean, here we are, you can see all these little chips floating around. I've got one of a picture of a U8 here. I think that's that one, or not, doesn't really matter. Well, that looks to me like something like an LL2464 or something like that. But we'll have another look at what that is a bit later. As we will with a couple of the other chips, or not. They're ancillary chips, so they are what they are, aren't they? Well, there are a couple of things that you can't easily see underneath this, and I'm not going to move it all out the way, but I've got a picture of one of them. Looks to me a bit like a sort of regulator type of thing. I could be wrong. I haven't been and checked. But I will do. It's a 117AJG RHR09. Looks sort of regulator type thing or something like that. We'll find out later. And if you take a look, it looks a bit like some sort of regulator there, doesn't it? You can see it. Can I make out what that is? Not quite right now. But again, we'll maybe take a look at that a bit later. Now, interestingly, which I haven't seen documented anywhere, by the way, is this little thing down here. You can see just down there. You can see that, hopefully, where the end of my pointer is. And that is marked up. There's a picture on the screen now. As a reset. It's a J4 and it says reset. So make your own mind up whether that'll reset the board. Nobody else can tell you. We've also got a number of crystals sitting around. There's one there near the processor, and another one near the processor. So they're sort of probably processor related, but who knows? Who cares? But there they are. There's a few of them on the board. I doubt I'll go into any real depth with them, but there you go. And we've also got the sort of usual capacitors stuck on the board. You'll see them. There's a lot less in this board than there is of the Axe FX3, of course, but my view with that is, well, there's a lot less to fail. One little concerning thing, and it's not just on this particular unit, it's something I've seen on, well, I've seen it on Roland, I've seen it on lots of different brands. I've even seen a whip on a Marshall amp with a very similar type of connector. It's these here. You can see them across the back. Well, I hope you can. I'll probably photograph those as well. Yeah, you can see them, and you know, they're soldered to the main board, them are. Yeah, they're all fun. And I can imagine if you've got to change these out. I mean, you've got, what have we got here? FX returns and sends and all that sort of stuff. There's those 6 in the middle in any case, which we'll get to see what they are later. Yeah, it's not the best thing in the world, but I suppose, yeah, putting them on fly leads or something, well, maybe they just didn't bother. I don't know. And another little thing, you've got the sort of USB connector here, right there. That silver thing, if you can see it. There it is. Nice and simple USB, and there's another one underneath this board, underneath this MIDI board. They're mounted onto the PCB directly. You know, if you're going to ram them around a lot, which you are on a 4 unit, well, if it works loose, you're going to have to take all this board out to solder it back. And similarly with other little things like these switches down here, you can see the sort of thing that's going on. This I/O down here, it's all on the PCB. And just for you techies, I found this little connector here. Well, interesting. It's near the PCB, and it's labelled up core flags. Now, they could be American flags or anybody else's flags, but nobody's going to tell you what they are, so don't worry yourself. Oh, you haven't got a diagram? Well, there you go. It says a lot, doesn't it? Ah, here we are. Now we're looking at the other 2 daughter boards. I'll call them daughter boards. There's no other word I can use. This one at the top here has got the buttons that you use on the outside of the unit, and this part here is actually the screen area. And interesting to note that number down under there, that's a PB. It's PB0468-02. Yeah, I think I know that brand, but we'll leave it at that for now. Maybe I'll come back to it later. Yeah, it's got a QC check on it at least, which is more than I can say for the bottom board, which doesn't have any QC check on it. At least no sticker that I can find. You'll see the usual screen driver type of chip. It's an AIO RA8875L3N, and it's nothing special, and yeah, I've seen many of them. They seem to be everywhere, them do. It's probably a bought-in module. Probably. I can't guarantee that, of course, but it's probably a bought-in module. And you get what you get. I just wonder how hard it is to change these buttons if we get any of these fail later down the road, or you spill some coffee on the outside. Yeah, that'd be quite interesting to work on, wouldn't it? You engineer types. Yeah, no diagram, and yeah, difficult. And of course, you've got the also ran chip, this one that sits here, it must be controlling these buttons. I'll be pretty sure of that. That's a Xilinx XC9572. Looks like an XL with a load of other numbers underneath it. But there it is. Just for, you know, pointing out that there's one there. And I'm sure you'll have fun changing it if you get a problem. The bottom board that's got the buttons on with lights around them. Well, there's its board. I'm not going to pull it apart. There's no real point in doing any of that. It is what it is. Not much more you can say about that. But you have got this other little board at the top here. The one for the two, the two levels, I think they are. I think they are. I've been asleep since I looked at them. But there it is. It's on a little PCB. And once again, you got to find the bits to repair it if you get a problem. And that, my friends, sort of shows you the inside of the FM3. But by the time you take the FC6 and you put it at the side of this one, well, have you got an FM9? Have you got one? Yeah, interesting to note. And this one, by the way, this one's marketed as a Mark II turbo. I always smile at the turbo mode and things like that. More of that later. Anyway, I'm going to put this back together and then we're going to have a look around the top and the back. How exciting, huh? Okay, well, here we are. I'm not really going to spend all day on this. I'm just going to run you through it quickly, because I'm like that. Okay, at the back we've got a place to put headphones. Why not? Yeah. Input 1, says here instrument, obvious really. These are the outs, a left and a right, stereo. Some people operate this unit purely in mono, and they take the left and make it the same as the right, or make the right the same as the left. Well, take your pick. You've got an XLR ground lift button here, pretty boring. We've got an input 2 right there. We've got an FX return balanced and an FX send humbuster. Yeah. We can have two pedals. And we've got the in and then the out 2. That's another one. We've got this Fastlink 2, which in our case we will be connecting an FC6 to. I don't know how else you can do with it, but there you go. Got the usual USB connectors, just happen to be sitting there waiting to be connected to. And you can connect your PC and that sort of stuff to that. Got a MIDI in and out. Good. We've got a SPDIF out, if you really want one. And I noticed that this is 100 to 240 volts AC, and it's actually got an on and off switch, which, well, that's good. And it's 50 to 60 hertz, 30 watts maximum. So there, and that's what you get around the back. Oh, you do get these things here, these two little things, these levels 1 and 2, which we did see before from the inside. Anyway, let's go around the bottom of this unit and then we'll come round the top. Okay, so this is what we've got round the back, and it's always interesting to take a look at what's around the back of any brand of product. But I always like to have a look around the back of the Fractal one because, well, historically it hasn't always been where it should have been, in my opinion. But that's just an opinion. It says here, don't block the ventils. Well, they're at each side, just beyond there and beyond there. So don't, that's an answer. Down the bottom we've got this little section for fan. I don't know whether that's input or output, well, who knows. It's one or the other. I'm not even going to check, but it's there. And you've got those vents on the side of the unit, do remember, like it says. Then it says caution, risk of electronic shock, blah blah blah, warning shock hazard, bit of foreign, do not expose to rain or moisture, blah blah blah. So it's not waterproof. Yeah, well, what do you ask? What do you want? Blood? It complies with part 15 of the FCC rules, blah blah blah, device must not cause harmful interference, and the usual sort of stuff really. It's got a CE approval logo on it. It's got a Roche compliance dustbin. Actually, that's that one there. I don't know why he's got a Roche underneath that, because that's not Roche. Roche doesn't actually have a proper logo that's designated. The dustbin, does. That's a bit weird. And then he's got this UKCA, which I don't want to really tell them, but that's been postponed for a couple of years at least, maybe longer, with the things going on in the UK. Who knows? But I don't notice on here anywhere where it says made in China. Nowhere, nor on the back, the front, the top, the sides, the inside, there, anywhere. Yeah, doesn't say made in China. It should be. I could be wrong, but you go figure. It says made in China on the cardboard box, but of course you throw that away. It's the unit itself that you should be asking about. Where's this made? When you've thrown the box away. And I don't see it on here. No. I think that's a bit of an omission personally, but, well, it's not up to me, it's up to them. I won't get into trouble, will I? Yeah, there it is. So I've taken the liberty to plug it in, so let's just turn it on and see if Tony screwed it. I don't think so, somehow. Yeah, well, there it goes. This is what you get when you fire up. It now proudly presents you with the word turbo and Mark II up there. Oh, you haven't got a Mark II. Oh, never mind. Yeah, you can't have everything, can you? And the turbo, as you can see, takes some time to boot up. That's all I've got to say. Look at it. What's going on there? I don't know. Is it better than the Helix? No, I don't think it is. The Helix takes its time too. Maybe not as long as this one. I don't know. Look, it's still going. Oh my God. Yeah, well, I suppose with your thousands of IRs and your hundreds of amps and your X, Y and Z, I suppose it does take time to fire up. Yeah. Well, there it is. We can see that now it's fired up. We've got a colour screen. What size screen is it? Well, who knows? Let's go check. Now, I'll work in inches, right? I don't want none of these centimetres or millimetres. We don't want none of that, do we? America works in inches, so I might as well use inches, haven't I? Yeah. It looks to me like a 5-inch screen. Does it look like a 5-inch screen to you? I'm sure it does. And by the way, it's not a touch screen in any way, it's just a screen. The cheaper one. Yeah, the touch screens cost a lot more, of course. Yeah, you have to remember that, don't you? You know, keeps the cost down. Well, we'll talk about cost a bit later on this Unix, but that's another story. Well, taking a look at this, let's see where we go with it. We've got these 5 buttons down here that choose what's above each button, usually the case. Yeah, you've got a couple of level buttons there on the edge, which they do stick over the edge a little bit, but I think they're protected enough, they are. You've got these screens down here which tell you what each button is. Well, to an extent they do. And because it's only got 3 buttons and sort of 8 or 9 settings, if you will, per set of buttons, it's a bit of jiggery pokery. It's one of the reasons why you might buy the FC6. Yeah. And go into OMG6 mode, I think it is, or 9 mode. Oh, I don't know. They have some comical stuff, these boys. It's like that Fractal bot. I mean, should have come up with another name than that. My God. Anyway, let's not worry about the Fractal bot for now. Oh, yeah. So there they are. And these are bigger screens than on the Mark I. And, you know, I always look at things like this. And things like the turbo, and we're going to be talking about these 3 a little bit later. And my opinion, which could be totally wrong, everybody will tell me it is, especially if you own one. But that's another story. But if you look at the buttons here, we've got a button that'll take you home, which reminds me of didn't that come from line 6? I think they had the home button first. You've got an edit button, a store button, pretty obvious what them are. You can bang on here for the tuner or for tempo. We can change the value. So moving up and down there. You can change the value. We can navigate with these four. It's pretty basic, really. You've got an enter button, an exit button, and a page left and right button. We can see what's going on the inputs side of things, and we can see what's going on the output side of things. Then we've got, this is telling you whether the thing's been edited, whether there's any MIDI in, and you know, there's the tempo flash, and that's about it on the top. You've got two very nice handles. I like to see them. In fact, the overall build quality of this unit, yeah, it's rather different than what I used to know Fractal for. Yeah, we'll more about that in a minute. Anyway, that's basically the outside of the unit and the inside of the unit. Now I think we'll go up top and just draw a few conclusions, and then we'll move on to the sort of things like the chips. Yeah, sounds like a plan to me. I don't know. It's all interesting, isn't it? And by the way, guys, just before you do go back to the top, yeah, don't forget to subscribe, will you? It's quite important that I can get subscribers on my channel. I think I've got, I don't know, 38, 39, 40,000 subscribers. So I have got a few who like what I do. Of course, some of them don't, but they're not subscribers. But if you like this sort of thing, I take tube amps, I take simulators, I take guitars, I take basically anything that is sort of music related, and I can do these inside and outside reviews that will show you an awful lot more than any of those paid for reviewers will ever show you. They won't show you the things that I do because they're getting paid by the paymaster. I don't get paid by a paymaster. I go and buy the unit at full price. I get no discount out of these people. I didn't expect any. I pay the price, and I do that to show you people what you're buying. My videos are geared towards people that really don't own one. Really, it's more towards people that are considering to buy a product. Subscribe, do that thumbs up thing, that's always important too. And ring that bell, and then you'll get notified about, you know, the new reviews that I do. I don't do reviews every day, by the way, so don't expect them. And yeah, well, let's carry on. Let's go back up top. Ah, there you are. I wonder where you got to. Yeah, well, I hope it's interesting so far. I mean, looking at this unit, you can tell it's been made in a different place than where the original one was put together. Well, I don't mean the FM3. I don't mean this one, this FM3. No, I mean the Axe FX3 and the Axe FX2. Yeah, those devices were, well, we'll call it assembled over in America. And somehow I don't think they did a very good job of those. But I can tell that this one's been assembled by, well, nicest way I can put it, people who know what they're doing. Yeah, so full marks for the assembly. That's it's very good. There's no getting away from that. But there are a few of those problem areas on the I/O at the back that are stuck on the main board that I did talk about a little bit. You know, you need to bear that in mind really, because if you do get problems with any of this, once it's past its, I think it's a 1-year warranty on these things. Yeah, well then it could be a bit of fun. And if you haven't got a circuit diagram, which you won't have, yeah, I guess at some stage, if you get some problem, you could be going back to Fractal audio. Well, if you're in America, best of luck with all of that. But me being in England, I'd be going back to G66, and G66, I don't mind them guys. They're actually quite friendly and quite good guys. Yeah, it's what I'd expect from a supplier. And it wouldn't be what I'd get from the supplier in America, I don't think, somehow. Okay, well, there are a summary of things on their internet site. I can see them here, all quite interesting. Some of the features are, it's a compact floor unit, it's got 3 switches, which is the first problem. Let's talk about them as we go. It's got 3 switches, but it's got up to 12 separate things that you can use from 3 switches. Now they do have some ways around that. You could go and buy that FC6 that's sitting on the floor over there. Or I guess you might not buy it because it's £525 here in the UK. And while we're on price, we might as well talk about it, get the ball out of the gate. This is £1,250 in England, which makes it a very expensive product, really, compared to some of the comparison products that are out there, including Line 6, including even Kemper and things like that. I mean, £1,250 for a standard cut-down unit, which it definitely is cut down because it's got 3 buttons. Yeah, it seems a bit high on the price range to me. At £1,000, bear in mind it's about $1,250, I think, or something like that in America, so it's probably £1,000 in the States. It doesn't help. Let's put it that way. It talks a lot on here about hundreds of accurate models of amps and other devices with real tube amp sound and feel. Well, I've yet to find one of these that's got a tube amp feel. I hate to say this to you, but I don't think that's quite right. Of course, the people who own one will be telling me that these are at least as good as a tube amp or better. I'll be telling you different. It doesn't have the same feel. It doesn't quite make the same feel, no matter how we look at it. And I've looked at so many other ones, and I don't think this one's really any different than all the others. Don't get me wrong, it's very passable. I've seen people play through these, and very, very passable. But you bring it back into the studio, and you don't have the same feel. Somehow, it's not there. It says here it features Cygnus amp modelling developed for the Axe FX3. Well, it is developed for the Axe FX3, but you can't do everything with this because there's not the same power as in the Axe FX3. So, while it's developed for the Axe FX3, I'm not sure that's actually a good thing or a bad thing. Because if you're setting everybody up to think that it's an Axe FX3, I think you'd be wrong. See, it talks about factory cabs. All the cabs from an Axe FX3, best of luck with them, there's thousands, plus 1,024 user cabs, so you've probably got 3,000 cabs to be playing with. Notice it's talking about cabs, interesting. Impressive multi-effects capability based on the Axe FX3, based on it. It's not the same, it's based on it. Uncompromising sound quality and roadworthy reliability. Well, you only find that out when you've got one or when you drag it off on the road. It's built well enough, don't get me wrong. And on they go again. Fantastic flexible 3-button integrated foot controller. Well, it might be flexible if you want to do the dance. And they've got ways around it. They've sort of designed ways around the 3 buttons. But me, I bought that thing down there, that FC6, simply because I'm not going to sit dancing around now. Which button was this and which was that? It's not the time for it, have you? It rambles on about the 3-core Griffin processor plus dedicated GPU. They've all got them, haven't they, these days? Rugged steel chassis, yeah, that's good. That is good. Easy to use front panel interface. Well, it's easy to a point. That's what I'd say. Yeah, and you do get the free FM3 edit software. Notice it's free and it's ongoing and it's the same as everybody else. Yeah. Ultra low noise instrument input. XLR stereo main out. Well, it sounds like line 6. Additional stereo I/O pair plus headphones and SPDIF outputs. It sounds like line 6. 4x4 USB audio, 2 onboard switch, pedal jack, blah blah blah. Easy to read precision tuner, big deal. Upgradable firmware, big deal. So, yeah, them are the features they tell you about, so they must be the important ones, right? Anyway, enough of my frivolousness. It's not bad. It's not bad. I'm surprised it hasn't got a touch screen. Yeah. Well, a bit cheap, isn't it? Yeah, I expected a touchscreen. Even Headrush's got a touchscreen. Even the little cheap one's got the touchscreen. This one, well, no, we're not spending on that. I can hear them now. Oh yeah, but Headrush it's different. Well, why is it different? It's a floor pedal, just like this one, and that's got touchscreen. Oh yeah, but it sounds different. Yeah, well it might do, but I'm more interested in the operability of this with its 3 buttons than I am, worrying about some competitive product. But the competitive product does have touchscreen. You decide yourself. Now, when I look at all this at the top, I'm not against it actually. I like the unit. As it happens, I do like the unit. I'm not saying I like everything about it, because I certainly don't. But it's likeable enough. It's just a high price. Anyway, let's move on to talking about some of these other things. You know, sometimes when people manufacture products, they'll manufacture them for period X. And I think the original unit was 3, 4, 5 years long or something like that. I'm not going to go and chase to find out, but this one was made in something like July 2023. The previous one had been going for a while. That's a fact. And all of a sudden, this one comes along with this turbo processor. And with, funny enough, bigger screens for these 3 buttons. You can see them down there now. So, out of the goodness of their heart, this company's come along and upgraded the processor, probably for free, they'll tell you. And upgraded these screens, they'll tell you. Oh, it's all free. Or not. Well, what's that all about? Well, I can tell you, just from personal experience, that over time what happens is you'll find that various chips become obsolete or very hard to get. And when they get hard to get, the price does this. It goes up and up. I've seen $1 chips end up at $11. Yeah. Why? Oh, because there's a shortage. Or because they stop making them and the price, it just goes up. And it goes up because of the greedy people that are left with the chips. That's what happens. That's the way life is. And sometimes, I'm not saying this is the case with all of this stuff, but sometimes you can get displays that actually become obsolete. They sell them for X number of years, and then all of a sudden you can't get them. Oh, what are you got to do? Well, with both of those two things, you've got to go and redesign what you've already got. And looking at this unit here, it could be a suspect. It's a good word. A suspect for having a processor that became obsolete and screens that became obsolete or hard to find or. You go figure. And then all of a sudden, the maker, whoever it is, has to redesign. And what they do is they do redesign, but they usually end up at a very similar price or the same price or sometimes even cheaper. But what they do is they then go out and market that, I'll call it an upgrade, but it's a forced upgrade. I'll call it an upgrade. This forced upgrade is marketed as a positive. So for example, now turbo, now Mark II, now with bigger screens. You get the idea of where I'm coming from. I'm not saying that this one is exactly like that. Not at all. But I am telling you that is what happens. It is definitely what happens because I have seen it. And it's not entirely unusual. Yeah. So just bear that in mind, won't you, when you start thinking about version 2 and things like that. It could be a natural progression, not by the maker, but by the chip makers and the display makers and things like that, that force the maker into doing something about, you've stopped making that one, right? Interesting point. Now I have taken a quick look at the Fractal audio software, and it reminds me so much of all the other software I've used on the other Fractal devices. It's probably some cut down version, but it's not that cut down. So while this unit can't utilise every feature that's on an Engl FX3, it simply can't, because first of all, it hasn't got the same I/O, it hasn't got the same power internally, they say. I haven't checked the FX3 for a while, but I could be back. But it's sort of cut down a little bit, and they say, oh yeah, well, this power, it's an extra 10% of power, but an extra 10% of power isn't an Engl FX3 power. So you're always going to be, well, the cheap kid on the block. Oh, he's got one of them. You know what they're like. But there are some things carried across from the other devices, the FM9 and the Engl FX3, that really can be very frustrating. Things like 2,000 IRs. 1,000 IRs of your own. There's so many things. There's some good things that have appeared. But these other things are just mind-boggling. Enough about that for now. What we're going to do is move on to the chips, because I think we ought to be looking at them now. I've tried to sum up quickly some of the things about this, and yeah, all interesting. Well, it's time to take a look at the chips. I'm not going to go into hyperdepth because I don't think it's really that necessary, except to say what the main processor is, a couple of other bits and pieces, and that'll do, I think, without going mad, as they say. So, yeah, let's start. Okay, well, the main processor involved here is an ADSP SC587. And interestingly, let's put that away, I've got the sheet on it here. ADSP 587. Yeah, SC587. And here are a few of the features. I'm not going to spend long on it really. Dual enhanced Shark plus high performance floating point cores. Up to 500 MHz per Shark core, so it's a dual core. 32-bit, 40-bit, 64-bit floating point support. 32-bit fixed point. Byte, short word, long word addressed. There's an ARM Cortex A5 inside, and I can tell you near enough that's in most of the products I've looked at. I think, if I remember right, it's even in a headrush. Yeah. Or not. Anyway, that's 500 meg or 800 DMIPS with Neon VF blah blah blah. It's all the same, makes little difference. 32K L1 instruction cache and 256 KB level 2 cache with parity. So what? Powerful DMA system. It's on-chip memory protection, which is worth noting. It's an integrated safety features. Yeah, I don't know what them are, but it's probably in here, but I won't be going that far through it. It's 19mm by 19mm, and I could go on about that sort of stuff. It's ROS compliant, if nothing else. Low system power across automotive temperature range, so you can put them in a car. Fancy that? Is this a car? I don't think it is. The memory, there's a large on-chip L2 SRAM with ECC protection, up to 256 KB on-chip L2 ROM also. 2 level 3 interfaces optimised for low system power, providing 16-bit interface to DDR3, yeah, as old as that, DDR3, supporting 1.5 volt capable DDR3L devices, DDR2 and LP DDR1 even. I wonder which one's in this. Well, we're going to find out. It's probably the cheap stuff, or not, because it's not a cheap device, is it? There are some additional features such as security and protection, cryptographic hardware accelerators, fast secure boot with IP protection. So you're not getting any, you're not being able to steal the code, sadly. Not that I would. Support for ARM Trust Zone. Accelerators. There's a high performance pipelined FFT, IFFT engine for 2R HAE sync offload engines. And I could carry on. But you know what? I'm not going to. It's all you need to know about it, really. Except for one thing. Yeah, I mean, that's just the table of contents. If you can even see it, you might not. Doesn't really matter. But the most important thing about that processor in there, front to back, is they're typically £40. Yes, that's all they are, £40. A rather cheap device as far as some of the DSP processors go that I've seen. I've seen them substantially more expensive than that. So that's the SC587. The costs all of £40, and yeah, you might be able to get them cheaper if you buy a lot. Who knows? Maybe they sold 10 of these, or maybe they sold thousands. But whatever, you won't be really paying particularly much different than £40 or the dollar equivalent. Okay, well, the next one up, I'll call it a D9 PTK. It's probably on the screen somewhere. It's basically a DDR3L SD-RAM module, and that's what I can make out of it. And they cost a shocking price of $1.90. Yeah. It's an automotive grade 2 gig DDR SD-RAM memory chip with 16-bit data width, 17-bit address bus width, and 16M words per group, blah blah blah. And on it goes. Features include differential clock input, blah blah blah. This chip and many very like it, yeah, they riddled throughout this type of product, and I'm not surprised to see that at all. But at $1.90 and there's two of them in there, well, that's $3.80 plus your £40. Oh, it's getting expensive, man. Let's move on. Okay, well, moving on to that chip that I said was a sort of regulator or something. I wasn't sure what it was, but I've looked it up. And it's basically, according to this, it's a 1 amp low dropout positive fixed and adjustable voltage regulator. So I wasn't really that far off. I won't bore you with its details, but that's what it was. Yeah, basically a pretty cheap regulator. Just try and find the price of them, but it's not that easy. Let's see what we've got. Nobody likes to give you the price for some reason, but I can tell you now, it won't be expensive. Let's move on. There's the RAIO chip, which I'm not going to bother looking at because I know it's for that display, and I'm confident the display was bought in, pre-made by another company. Yeah, so enough of that one. In fact, it's the same chip, give or take, that I've seen in lots of them that have got screens, well, sort of similar to that. This next one's a Xilinx XC9572XL. It's a high-performance CPLD, whatever that is. Yeah, well, let's have a look what it is. The description, it's a 3.3 volt CPLD targeted for high-performance, low-voltage applications in leading-edge communications and computing systems. It's leading edge? I don't think so. It is comprised of 4 5V18 function blocks providing 1600 usable gates with propagation delays of 5 nanoseconds. See figure 2 for overview. Well, I haven't got the figure 2 here now. Didn't want to go and do that. So basically it's a bunch of gates at the 1600 of them. Yeah, what more can I say? Not a lot. Well, I can say one more thing. They're £8.27 and there's only one inside this device. Okay, there's also those little crystals that we saw. There's 2 or 3 of them. This particular one's a CTS 23CB3. It looks like 24 meg, that one does. Yeah, 24 meg. And those cost a scary £1.29 if you buy one. You can imagine how cheap they are inside this, can't you? Yeah. Now just talking a little bit about those, the main processor for a moment or two. The ADSP SC587. and the FM9 and the FX3, you'll find that each device has got a more powerful processor. Well, that doesn't sound important really, does it? It's still compatible, isn't it? Well, it may be or it may not be compatible to the extent, shall I say, that you might think. I've already seen on some of these forums here where people are saying, well, it doesn't this and it won't that, and as long as it's 20% this or 2% that, or you get the idea. So the main processor is important, but in my opinion, largely for, well, compatibility. The FM9, it says here, I haven't checked an FM9, but it says that uses 2 dual-core sharks. They're probably the same one, right? It says here the FM3 has 1 dual-core shark, which we know it has. And the FX3, well, what's that got? The 3 uses 1 dual-core Texas Instruments DSP. Notice they never talk about exactly which one, which is a bit scary, really. Maybe they're a bit worried about it, or they don't want to tell you, or you might find it $39 each, or you go figure. But there it is, it's all in there. Yeah, not much else I can say about processors and the rest, except to say that really the FM3 is a cut down version of the FM9, and that's a cut down version of the FX3, quote, turbo. That's enough for the chips. Let's wander on. So I guess we could turn into moving forward a little bit with some of the software, like the Fractal bot. I like to call it a Fractal ass, like a donkey. Yeah, rather than a Fractal bot. I suppose I'll stick with bot for now. It's a particularly archaic name, isn't it? So yesterday, and so's the picture of the bot on the software. You could do better than that. But there you go. There it is. Yeah, it's an application for Mac or Windows, blah, 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 blah. You can send and receive data. Yeah, so I suppose I'll download it. That's going to be the next thing. So I can check out what software's in this thing. Oh, as if I didn't know. Let's go do that. Okay, well, just before we jump ahead of ourselves with the bot, I just downloaded the various bits of manuals. There's a few of them, not one, a few of them. The bot itself and the firmware upgrade that I've got to do, even though I asked for the latest firmware to be installed in this one. That's something you should consider when you're ordering, and I did consider it. I put it in the notes and I got the older version, sadly. However, what I just want to point out in that file, that directory there's 51.6 megabytes of downloads and messing around. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Best of luck. I'm going to go and do the upgrade. I'm not going to waste your time or anybody else's showing you how to do it, because all the minions have done that. They're all over the show. Yeah, same as the minions that go playing it by the hour. That's what they do, and that's about all they do. So, yeah, I'll go and install this now, and then we can get on with it. Yeah, just before I go anywhere, back down to the PC, I was just about to connect it up. I've got my cable and all the rest, and there's no USB-C. What is this thing? Everybody else is being driven to USB-C. How come this has got a USB Type A on it only? The cheap stuff. That's what that is. Old-fashioned cheap stuff. You need a USB-C like everybody else. Just thought I'd mention that one. Okay, last thing before I move on to version 8. Yes, the Fractal robot decided to tell me there was a version 8. I already knew that. But it does tell me a little bit about the changes and things like that. And it talks about additions and updates and things like that. There's a lot of updates and a lot of additions and a lot of changes. Yeah, new Cygnus X3 amp modelling. It's the latest amp modelling, blah, blah, blah. Nearly all amps have been remastered using new measurement techniques and analytic methods. What that really means is that the old methods And the old analytics weren't so good. Because I can tell you now, these guys and nobody else is going to upgrade them if they could. Makes sense, doesn't it? What else we got? Nearly all amps have been remastered, yeah. Existing presets are not altered. Yeah, but a hard or soft reset will load the updated values. There's an improved preamp, power amp and output transformer modelling. Updated various default values for most amp models for power tube, grid bias, cathode resistance, as applicable, supply sag and cathode follow. Well, the real question is, are the figures that they're putting in there off a real amp? Or are they just their interpretation of what they should be? It doesn't tell you in here, don't bother going and look for that. And then it carries on and it talks about this is an update to the core amp algorithms and may change the sound of your presets. I hope you've got them all back. Oh, you haven't? Oh, well, never mind, you're too late for that. Use Fractal bot to make a backup first. Well, I'm glad he's telling you that because otherwise you would never have known. Especially if you hadn't looked at my video, yeah. Because you never read these, do you? You never read this stuff. Additional amp block updates. Updated all JS410 lead modes based on current production of the JVM 410 HJS. I really don't want to say too much about this because the HJS hasn't been made for years. What's this guy on about? Or these guys on about? That's even worse. It's there. Current production. There's no current production of JVMs. Oh, I need to stop laughing. It's got a pile of new amp models. Whether they're good, bad or indifferent, who knows? But if they update them in the next fix, they weren't so good, were they? New drive pedal models. Sunrise Splendor model. I like that, yeah. Improved tremolo block. And on it goes. Other new features and improvements. Improved stack hold in the delay block. Improved transition between stack and hold. In hold mode, repeats are now infinite and nearly may degrade. Note that if the compander isn't, it's doing all these fixes. Yeah. And I'm telling you now, there is a lot of them and there's a lot more fixes. I'm not going to go through it, but all I can say to you is, yeah, version 8, April the 29th, 2024. And it rambles on about a problem when you upgrade to version 8. It can zap some of the things that are in there, so you've got to jiggery-pokery a bit. It's probably an hour's work by the time you finish messing around reading that, messing around in general, and you might make it work. Let's hope we do. I'll see you in a minute when I've done mine. Okay, well, I've done the upgrade. It's now version 8, and it's got all its latest cabs. They can call them whatever they like. And there it is. I did a backup of the version 7 and a backup of the version 8 afterwards. And it has taken, with downloading the files and messing around and all the rest of it and waiting for this slow device to actually upload things, it's taken about an hour. So you need to prepare about an hour's worth of spare time to go and get it to where you should. And along the way, you get lots of different screens, yeah, updating firmware, done, important, do this, update that. That's on version 8, but then you've got to go and do the Dynacabs, which is another fair bit of time messing around. And then it says it's finished, then you've got to back up again. Yeah, and the rest of it. And even when you open the editor then zooms off and spends a good 5 minutes or so reading what definition strings and a multiple of other things. So don't think you're just going to go click, click like you can on a lot of software and it works. It's a bit of a convoluted method. It's certainly more complex than the Helix. There's no question to that. So next, we're going to take a quick look at the editor. I'm not going to spend all day on it. I'm just going to talk about one or two of the things that I've seen and I haven't seen and what's similar in this to a Helix or many of the others, if you will. And yeah, that sort of thing. So we can get a bit of an overview about it. And then, yeah, you'll be better informed if you're going to go and buy one. Oh, you've already got one. Well, you'll know all the pluses and minuses. Yeah. So, yeah, I'll be back with the software, the editor that is. Okay, well, here we are, taking a quick look at the software. And I mean a quick look, I'm not going to spend all day. I'm just going to show you the points that I think, well, to be honest, are either similar to the Helix or beyond anything that you might imagine. And that might sound a bit crazy to people that have used devices like the Helix or any one of that other myriad of simulators that are out there. But here's the FM3 edit, and notice that it is the FM3 edit and not the FM9 edit or the AXFX3 edit. So they are, in some ways, don't ask me which ways, but they are different. Because if they were all the same, well, I guess they'd all be one application, and they're not. They are different. This one, by the way, was the latest version that I could download. And, I sort of pulled it down off the site when I got the equipment and I'd done the upgrade to the firmware. Which, by the way, on the firmware, just while we're still on that, do notice that they had version 7 firmware, but it's version 8 actually. The manual was still on version 7. So I guess there'd be lots of things missing, unless version 8 upgrade was pointless. Yeah, that's really the logic I can think of. So let's start where we mean to continue, up in this top left corner there where we can see FM3 edit. It's connected, there's a little green light there, which you can probably see. And we've got these sort of, I tend to call them like scenes myself. Yeah. These are the various presets, but within each preset there is like a scene. And there's 8 scenes as standard, but I believe that, like most things with Fractal audio, there's probably umpteen ways to increase the number to something ridiculous. I'm not even going to try to explain it. The first time I saw scenes was actually on a Helix, on a Helix rack, of which I've got one. And you can see on this, if I hit number 1, we've got this going on. If I hit number 2, things will change. You'll see various things changing, including, in this case, the channel. But the channel may or may not change dependent on the preset, on how it's all been set up. These are just defaults, so there's nothing special about these. See, that's flipped across back to channel A. And you'll see all these different things happening across here as we move through these various scenes. Sometimes there's more or sometimes there's less, or they turned on or they turned off. Well, you can see that one. Yeah, there's not much on there, but as soon as we come back down here, you can see all these have turned on. Yeah, well, that's the way scenes are, and they're not really that different in the Helix. Well, what else have we got? We've got these various bits here, presets, or you can save copies and all the usual things. Then they've got these blocks, you can see them. Now if you look at blocks, you can cut, copy, delete, reset, blah, 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 blah. I aren't spending time teaching you about any of them. No real point for me to do that. But they are there. It can be quite daunting, and there are millions of things that you can do with this. A number of tools, if you can see any of them. You can see them. You can even, on this axe change, upload and download what you've been doing to other people that have got AXFXs or, well, whichever version they've got. It's a load of stuff on the settings as well. We could all sit there with the preferences and communications and refresh after new firmware and view this and do that. And there's a help. Yeah. I tend to use the manual myself because the sort of help that you might want to get from their forum, we'll call it that. Yeah, you might not want that sort of help because they can be, some of them can be particularly aggressive, and I do know that the administrator can, that's for sure. Who cares? We've got a tuner. There's the tuner, and you can see over there on the unit itself that the, yeah, I think that's a Peterson style of tuner. It doesn't really matter, does it? Tuners are 10 a penny, aren't they? That's the fact these days. We've got a tap setting where we can sort of change the beats. Moved it to 72 there, don't really care. You've got the CPU, which is running at 60% on this particular setup as it's come from the factory. So look at the amp. Yeah, it's all sitting there. You can save it, you can take a snapshot of it, you can set various things up. FC edit, FC per preset, sets and songs, you can do all that stuff. I just wanted to go through this and show you some of the things that I think are a little bit weird. And it's not the everyday things like the controllers and these fancy things for block info and quick build and scene manager and stuff like that. None of that really bothers me, and it's all fine. That's great. It is what it is, but it does offer a lot of features. That's not my main gripe with the Axe FX products. I've always had a bit of a problem with some of it though. Okay, well, what do you mean, Tony? You've had a bit of a problem with it. Well, let's choose the amp, because an amplifier is an amplifier is an amplifier. It might be a tube amp, it might be a transistor amp, they simulate. It could be anything. Could be anything. But with these amps, if you look down here, you've got a pile of things that equate to the amp and its settings and that sort of stuff. And it sort of applies to a lot of these other things as well across in this lane from the input to the output. Make it as complex or as easy as you like, it still applies. So if we look at the top where it says tone, this is a simple 1965 Bassman simulation. It's a Fender amp, and you know what Fender amps are like. They can be tending to be a little bit on the clean sort of side. Yeah. So here's the settings. Gain, bass, treble, input trim. Thanks very much. And then it's got this other thing just below there that you can see, and it says ideal. Well, let's click that. Oh my God. So now we've got bass, middle, treble, presence, depth, master volume, bright cap, high treble, input trim, boost, cut, fat, bright, you name it. Master volume trim and these other bits over here. Yeah, so if you take this whole section here, you can see it there. Well, it's sort of not quite a Bassman. There are things in there that are added that don't exist on a Bassman, that you can just go to the top of the Bassman and turn the knobs for. It just doesn't exist. So what you're doing, well, you're changing the 65 Bassman to something else that is a figment. If we move down to the next item, you've got preamp here. So you can see all this rubbish down here. Listen, you can't do any of that on a 65 Bassman. You just can't do it. It's quite that simple. So this all down here is a representation of pie in the sky or nothing. Listen, a simulation is either a correct simulation of a 65 Bassman or it isn't. And that there isn't. And then you move down to the power amp and you've got another massive pile of things that, well, to be honest, you can't do on the real amp. Then we can move down to power tubes. You've got another whole section down here. Once again, you can't get at any of these from from the top of a 1965 Bassman. Nor the power supply. I can see you all getting in there and opening her up and adjusting the power supply with your oscilloscopes. Oh, you don't need to do any of that. Just come in here and mess with these here. You don't know what they mean, but don't worry. You might be lucky and it might sound good. The emphasis really has to be on might. Then we can move across to the speaker. You know, there it is. Well, once again, like in the Axe FX3, in fact everything I've showed you in this little bit down here, you've got all this stuff that, well, 98% of people do not understand. And it doesn't matter whether the administrator in his Fractal forum does understand, because he's not the customer. The people that matter are the customer. And if you add these sort of complex things, because they are complex, if you think this is all nothing, I think you'd be, well, you'd be being a little bit silly there. Mr. Ordinary Guitarist does not understand most of this. So we go down here, now we've got input EQ, we can start messing around with all this stuff, or not. I don't know, don't care either. We've got an output EQ that we can mess around with. Well, that's fair enough. You can get them output EQs on virtually every simulator, I guess. And then we have another thing called dynamics, which is another section, output compressor. Well, that's not really part of the amp. You could have compression, but it's not really part of the amp, is it? But there they are. So going from the top with the tone, there it is. That's really the 65 Bassman that they have simulated, and everything else that you have down here, all this rubbish down here. And this is why I have problems with Fractal audio on any of the models, because nothing's changed. It's all as bad as it's always been. There they are. And, you know, people can say to me, "Oh, Tony, you're so biased." No, I'm not biased. How many people know all this stuff? How many people know about all this? And if you think, oh, it's just Tony, you know, he's one of them old guys. Sadly, I might be old, but I come from technology. I don't come from presenting people with huge amounts of technical information that they don't understand, because it's a recipe. It's a recipe for people not to buy the product. This device over here is as complex as it's always been. And I remember the FX3 some while back, and before that the FX2. And you can believe it or not, they've all been quite as complex as this one. Now, if you want to just use the tone one, that's great. I don't have any problems with that at all. But once you start introducing all these things down here, we got some power supply experts and some speaker experts and EQ experts and preamp experts, and yeah, the ideal, whatever that means. It's ideal to somebody, but it's probably not ideal to everybody else. Yeah, doesn't add up, that doesn't. So I just want to get that particular aspect out of the way without going really too much further into that particular silly method of doing the stuff. You don't see anything as ridiculous as that on Helix, for example, or even on that Fender. I don't think you know, the Fender Tone Master Pro, that is. I don't think you see anything like that on there. Well, yet. Let's hope they don't go that way. But maybe Fender's intelligent enough to understand that the more complex you make something, the less successful it will be regarding sales. I think I'll just show you this as well. While we're in here, I might as well show you a few different things. You've got a setup menu here, and we can go and click that nice and easily, and it'll open up this bottom window with all these extra things on it. And once again, you can sort of mess around here and change loads of stuff. In some ways, it's really, it's pretty good actually, that is. How you can relatively easily change things like the type of source that's coming in, whether it's stereo or mono, whether there's padding there, the necessary outputs, whatever you fancy of that. And then we can move along to the top config. That was the audio section. Top config, we can change a few things in there. I'm not going to bore you with them, you can see them. We can set up some scales if we want to change really the scales we're using. We can mess around in there. Got a tuner, which we've talked about. You've seen it. You can mess around with different strings and all sorts of things, offsets and who knows what, who cares what. Out one EQ, that's fair enough, and out two EQ, remember they can be different. So that's the little setup button, and yeah, it's quite useful, that is. I think it saves a lot of time. Well, it saves a lot of time if you're not sitting on the stage with this thing on the stage and no software. Now, do understand that it is perfectly feasible to set up one of these, an input and output, or a number of outputs, depending on which XFX you've got. You can set it up all from your own input. So you don't have to use these presets or any other scenes. You can make your own scenes and make your own stuff. Yeah, pretty much across the board with that stuff. So don't think that you're stuck on these things, because you're not. You know, it is what it is. The input side's the input side. You can see it down there. The output side is the output side. Again, thousands of things you can change. You can have an output 2, output 1 on this unit, then other outputs for other devices. And don't forget, we've got these cabs. Now the thing about cabs, there's the amp, here's the cabs. The thing about cabs is all a bit weird again, because we've got all these extra things that we can mess around with. There's the cab, just an awful lot of stuff there for you to play with. You can be playing with this stuff for 3 months or 6 months, or you might play with it until you sell it. Then we've got a preamp, yeah, believe it or not, room and air. I hope you guys are all completely familiar with all of these settings, because I'm pretty sure you're not. Alignment, I can see, you know, you're sitting back like some sort of mad professor. Oh yes, I'm totally familiar with that. You know, sort of an English accent. Well, you can have an American accent, but then you might be accused of copying Fractal audio in some way, I don't know. But there it is, there's loads of it. And of course, once we start into these IRs, it all starts to get a bit, well, bad. And the reason it gets bad is the number of IRs that you've got to pull into this darn thing if you want to. Now, 2,000 IRs isn't something to be very happy about, although some people will say that, of course it is. Yeah, and then you've got 1,000 of your own, which you can pull in. You might go and get these from over the side here, these God's cabs, and pull them in, or wherever it is you want to do. But here's a few to be going on with. Yeah. Well, there's some to begin on with. It's enough for me, let's put it that way. Let's put that away. I don't really want to change anything. I want to play it a little bit later as it comes from them. As these guys are supposed to be experts, they'll have great tones in there, won't they? Okay, I just want to run across these little bits and pieces here just quickly. Just for, you know, clarity more than anything. Here's a little section where you can set up your controllers that you might have connected to this thing. I'll just choose them. You can see yourself what's going on. Yeah. Oh, you don't understand it? Well, I wouldn't worry too much if you don't understand it. Yeah, I'm sure lots of other people don't understand it either. Yeah. We've got a quick build, which we can go and choose these bits and drop them in along an audio line. I'll call it that. You can call it what you like, and so can the manual, but you have an in and out, or 2 ins and 2 outs, or whatever you've got on your particular Fractal audio device. There it is. You can go and do it, and best of luck with that. But it is better than not knowing anything and working from a pure text menu. That's how I describe it. We've got block info, so if I hit that amp there, we can have a look at the block info, and this is telling you really for each block which channel you're on. Amp 1's on B, the drive is on A. You can see that. So you've got these channels that you can, well, in effect apply. And that applies to on the output side. I mean, I've used this up to now on output 2, and all I did was to flip across to output 2 rather than changing everything. You know. We've got a scene manager. Well, I'm not even going to describe it. It's there. It's all you can add and take away and mess around as much as you like. But it does have a performance mode. And the performance mode can be quite useful for when you're playing live. So you can pull in different, I'll call them into these preset performance controls and global performance controls. So you can in and out them if you like. And they can be very useful. There's no doubt about that. I think there's something similar on a Helix, yeah. Moving along a bit, you've got this FC edit. Yeah. The foot controllers, and you can set these up in so many different ways. These things over here. You've only got 3 of them, and you can have up to sort of 12 different settings or pushes, if you will. And then you've got that OMG9, or yeah, I think that's what it's called, an OMG9, that allows you, if you've got an FC6, to set it up in a way that's easy to work rather than some way that's hard to work, where they've written software to try and get around the lack of pedals. And to be honest, I think that's one of the biggest shortcomings in this FM3 device. Not enough buttons, no matter what they say. You know, you want at least 6 or 9 buttons, I would say. And you do want, you know, the OMG9 certainly helps. There's no doubt about that. But of course, you're paying £525 thereabouts for 6 switches. Yeah, rather expensive choice, I think. Okay, well, that was the FC edit. I'm not doing any more on that. You've got this FC Purse preset. So you can change your controller, your foot control per preset. Yeah, nice easy way to get to it, I suppose. You can see that there's just these huge amounts of information that you've got to sit and mess around with to turn this device into something that, well, devices like the Helix do by default often. I mean, it's just simpler to use. There's no getting away from it. Move along to sets and songs. Again, I haven't no practice with this. I'm the first guy to admit that. But it looks to me that you can set up set lists and songs, arrange presets and scenes in a custom sequence, so you can step through them with special foot switch controls, foot control and foot switches while you perform. Yeah, fair enough. There it is. That's where you do it. And yeah, you got another half a day's work. That's how I describe it. Active sets, you've got a number of sets. And there they are. They all look like the same, but that's just because they haven't been set up, of course. Okay, so that's enough of that. And we're back here to where we were. Yeah, all good. All interesting. And while we're talking about these blocks, you know, we were saying, okay, well, we've got a quick build. We can talk about blocks, but Fractal Audio, in their wisdom, have created a blocks guide, and it's for an FX3, FM9, and FM3. Sadly, the one I've got, let me just take a look there. The one I've got is June 2023, so if there've been any blocks added or anything that's changed, that was the latest one actually on their website, even though everything's been updated with later revisions of firmware and stuff like that. As I mentioned with the manual, it's a manual for firmware 7, not firmware 8. But out of date, aren't they? That blocks guide is a very complete reference for blocks and parameters, and you know, it's got its place. The only thing is, it's 101 pages purely for the blocks. Now, if you think, oh well, you know, I'll never have to look at that. Well, I suspect you will. So do bear in mind that it's 101 pages of blocks. It's crazy. And don't forget there's another guide called the Foot Switch Functions Guide. And yeah, that'll take you through a complete reference for the foot switch functions. And I didn't bother pull that one down because I got fed up of pulling down, well, manuals, if you want the truth, and firmware and all the other stuff. So just bear in mind that there is help with the foot switch functions guide, and particularly with these 3 buttons here. If you've only got the 3 buttons, I think you're going to need that. Yeah, I really do. On this system, you've got the ability to integrate to computers with USB audio as well, so you can record off to the PC and all the rest of it. But I was a little bit surprised to see just the old-fashioned USB A and B on this device. And you know, everybody today, here we are in June 2024, and there they are with old-fashioned USB A and B. You know, even Apple's switching across to USB-C, and so is everybody else, including people like Roland on machines that are half the price of this one. I might add. So there's no real excuse except that, well, we want to maximise the profitability before we have to upgrade further. And while we're on the subject of, using the USB, there's a feature called reamping. I don't know if everybody is familiar with that, but I know the Fractal boys will. But there's a lot more people than just the Fractal boys out there. And if you're considering, buying one of these, and you get down this road of reamping, but it does support it. And as I say, how they support it is probably through, I'll choose a different simulator amp or cab or whatever you want to guess at. Okay, well, while you're bearing in mind the inputs and the outputs, there is two separate outputs on the FM3. Now you might have one going to front of house, or you might have the other one going to FR systems for you to listen, so you can hear things, all that sort of thing. And they can be separate or replications of each other. So it can be very flexible, and it needs to be, bearing in mind it's a floor pedal that's probably going to be used out there, on stages and things like that. One of the things I like is that I can use this device as an effects processor only, so I can get rid of the the simulation amps that are in there, because simulated amps to me don't feel or sound quite the same as real amps. So being able to use the effects processor without those is always good. Okay, just while we're in this section where we're looking at this editor software, have you noticed that I've got all these things down the side of the screen, both sides, you can see them, and this editor isn't full screen. Well, this is running at 1920 by 1080, which is about the standard that everybody uses these days. For the majority of people, I dare say I wouldn't even want to try and run this on a 4K screen like I have in the studio. I wouldn't go near it with that software, I don't think. And one of the little concerning things is, it is a bit weird. So if you go to setting, you go to view and you say full screen like that, and we'll say, oh yeah, full screen. Well, you don't get full screen. What you get is this pushed over to one side in a sort of, it looks to me a bit like a half a job mode. And I've seen that before with other software vendors. Arturia, I think, is one of them. And certainly, yeah, some of the sort of software plug-in vendors, they have tiny little writing as soon as you're in 4K mode. It's not usable, basically. Whether this one is, well, go figure. But I suspect that it won't be, because you've got these other companies that are a little bit bigger than the likes of Fractal Audio that don't solve it either. Do note that there is MIDI in this device, an in and out type of thing, and it's covered extensively in the manual. And I'm just looking at the manual here, and there's page after page of information about that. Yeah, all of the MIDI reference tables are included, all that sort of thing. If you want to drive this FM3 or any of the other two with MIDI, well, it's there to do. And do remember, won't you, that one of the key inventors of MIDI actually was Roland Corporation and not Fractal Audio. I could literally spend days looking down all this stuff. Look at all this. That's just endless, honestly. Advanced doesn't exist except in somebody's mind. Yeah, so that's enough for this section. It's not a tutor video, it's not an explanation video, it's a video where I'm just pointing out a few different things as I see them, not as you see them, not as Fractal Audio see them, but as I see them, because after all, it is an independent review where I actually bought the equipment. Okay, well, that was a fairly, robust method of having a look at the edit software and some of the things that are good about it, and there are some good things about it. And some of the things that are really quite bad about it too. So it sort of goes both ways for me, does that software. But it has a window into the product. And the things like, thousands of IRs and all that sort of stuff, and the millions of settings that don't exist on the real gear in any way that you and I, ordinary people, can get at. That's always been a major concern for me. It might not be a concern for you. You might operate in some studio and, top of the world type of equipment, and you might think that the Axe FX is the B's and E's. Yeah, well, you might. But you're not Mr. Average, if that's the case. The Mr. Average of this world will look at this when they see these things that are, well, they're pretty abnormal, if you want the truth. 2,000 something IRs is abnormal. I think it's hundreds of amps could be abnormal, especially when you play them one after the other, as I have, from front to back. And you realise that, well, to be honest, a lot of them sound similar. And some of them don't sound at all like the real deal. And I can name one. And you can all argue with me as much as you like, doesn't really matter. I've owned an Engl amp. Yeah, an SE. You probably haven't. You've probably seen pictures of them, or you've got one of these and you think that you've got the Engl SE. Yeah. You haven't got it. And what's in there is not a replication of that Engl. But I can tell you something that has got an exact replication of it. And when you play through it, it sounds just the same as the thing that I recorded and owned. Yeah, exactly the same. And I might hear into the secret. You see, I have used Kemper since 2012. Yeah, Kemper, January 2012. And not long after that time, I was looking at the Fractal equipment and all that sort of stuff. So I've been around all of these types of simulators for a very long time, and later down the road, Line 6 came in and so on and so forth. But I have to tell you that when I had the Kemper and my Engl SE, my special edition, I'd bought it from Germany in Cologne. And, I decided to, copy it, with the Kemper gear. And I do remember at the time taking the Kemper and playing the recorded thing and playing the amp separate. And it was the same. It was absolutely the same. And you know what? This little thing here, this profiler, it's about 600 quid, this thing is. So it's overpriced in my opinion for what it is. It's just a player, it doesn't capture anything. But the advantage of that, if you want the truth, for me, the advantage of that is about 2,300 captured amps and speaker cabs and God knows what that's got. And the reason it's got it, it's been around so long. Whether you can do all that sort of stuff on this, or whether you want to, is another thing. But one thing I can tell you, that from their factory presets, the Engl SE doesn't sound like an Engl SE. It doesn't matter what I do with it, it's not the same. And this one here eats this for breakfast for the Engl SE that I captured back in, 2014 or something, or maybe before that. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. Okay, well, we have covered a lot of things in this review so far. And, one of the things I have to do is to go and look at manuals and things like that. And manuals for me are always a printout, because sitting there faffing around on a computer that might be where I am or not, or on the end of a phone where you can't read the text, isn't really a good answer. And I have to say, with this product, you're going to need the manual. The box guide that I mentioned before, here it is. Page after page after page after page. And that's just box. So you're probably going to need that. Unless you're some expert, which I don't think you are. Yeah. And then you've got the manual, haven't you? The actual manual. Here it is. I print it out. I always print it out. And here we are, page after page after page. And trust me, oh, you don't know any of this? Oh, well, guess what? Yeah, on it goes. People think, oh, Tony, you must be mad, you know, you don't need the manual. And I'm turning over 5 and 6 and 7 pages or 8 pages, 10 pages at a time. And on it goes, on and on and on. I've got to the end there. But then when I go a bit further, I've got this FM3 and FC6, oh my God, 9, or OMG 9, it should be, I think. Yeah, then that's another X number of pages. So do understand that complexity is the name of the game with this beast. It always has been. Nothing's really changed in that respect. Except maybe it's got even more complex, but I couldn't really tell you everything because the manual's for the FM3 firmware version 7. It's right there, absolutely, on the front of the manual. And that was absolutely the latest one available at that time. Like I said in the software section. Doesn't add up. No, I have decided to leave the FC6 off for this review. It's already too long. And what we'll do is we'll take a look at that as a separate review on why it's £525, or God knows how many dollars, and what you actually get for that money. I mean, I can see 6 switches and a few little windows, and apart from that, yeah, we'll see. So it's really a sort of summing up time now. And before we get into any playing that's going to be on the video, there'll be some. Good, bad or indifferent, doesn't matter. You're listening to the tones, aren't you? And by the way, all the tones that you will hear in the music section are actually their tones without modification, because my argument's this: if Fractal Audio don't know how to make good tones and store them in this by now, since 2004 I think they started in business, or 6 it could have been. Yeah, if they don't know how to do it by now, they never will they? Don't let them tell you, oh, that's... Yeah, if they can't do it by now, they never will be able to. Well, you know what? I think this is the first time I've actually seen a Fractal Audio product that's been really thought out in the respect of the hardware, for most of it. It's still difficult because it's complex, but regarding the physical build, you can tell, or I can tell, that this has been put together somewhere else. It's pretty obvious. I still don't like the fact that this mains connector is sort of glued onto the case. It's a crazy sort of methodology, that is, no matter where they've had it from. Maybe Fractal Audio insisted that it gets glued on in China. Who knows? They aren't going to tell you, and they certainly are never going to tell me. So that's one thing I didn't like. What else didn't I like? You've got to think of it like this, the summing up of the didn'ts and didn't likes. I don't like the USB, the fact that it's not USB-C. It's pretty ancient as the old USB A and B. In fact, I used to criticise Roland a lot for that, with some of their gear. I've still got some down there. You know, the old USB. But Roland have moved on a lot, and, you know, I think that's important. And do bear this in mind, that the Fender Tone Master Pro I've got sitting on the floor down there to review actually has a USB-C. Yeah. And I've got these other pieces of gear, they've all got USB-Cs. There's none of this old-fashioned stuff here. And remember, for the price of this is £1,250 in the UK. God knows how much it is everywhere else, but you can tell me if you want. It makes no difference. Post it down below, because it all matters. And you know, it's got these older technologies on. It's a bit it's a bit sad, is that? I think the 3 switches for up to 12 sort of settings, I think that's a little bit archaic. I think that was a mistake in design. And when I say a mistake, it's a mistake for the users It's not a mistake for Fractal Audio, who are gleaning as much profitability out of the product as they can get for as least product as they can get. Yeah. So the 3 buttons, unless you're using this in a really basic way, we could argue that, well, there can be 6 buttons or 8 buttons by dancing around. That's not the real answer. It really isn't. The real answer would be this FC6 here and the OMG9, which makes it into an FM9. But then the problem is, for almost the same money, I might add, 12 and 6 is 1890. You can buy the FM9 for 1900, or give or take, and that's got an extra processor in. Admittedly, it's the same processor, I believe, it's in this one, but times 2. And yeah, so there'd be no real point in wanting to do that, unless you really don't want the real estate being taken up on stage. That's another important aspect. The FM9's like so, and the AXFX sits in some case somewhere. So is there anything you do like, Tony? Some people will say, well, this is a negative review, it's useless. That's not the case. It's not a negative review. If this was perfect, it'd be a perfect review. It isn't perfect. In fact, I've never found a piece of equipment yet that is actually perfect. There's always one thing or something else. Just while we're at this point, this is the point where you should really be doing a bit of a subscription. Subscribe. Yeah, why not? Look at the amount of time that's gone into this video. Nobody else will review it like this. Not that Australian weirdo. Not them guys in America who get the devices for free. Or any of that stuff. No, this is a real review where the reviewer actually got his money out and bought it. Yeah, so if there's something the reviewer doesn't like, well, you could call me the owner, because that's what I am. If there's something the owner doesn't like, he's going to put it in his video just to let other people know that, hey, I don't like this, or I like this, or. Oh, you don't agree? Well, sadly, that doesn't matter. If you do agree, if you like this type of review, do that subscription, do that thumbs up thing, it does matter, and click that bell, ding that bell, don't smash it, ding that bell, and then you'll be notified when I do some more reviews. I'm not doing quite as fast at the moment. I'm back from America and got a lot of different stuff I'm working on, so it comes as fast as it comes. They're okay, but they are what they are. They're not really the answer. The answer is really, well, having more switches. I keep coming back to the switches rather than the little tiny screens, because they're still pretty little. This across the front here, just like a Line 6 Helix, just the same. Most of this use up here, it's all pretty much of a much. The only other thing I thought was a bit funny, these things are slightly at an angle on the top for the levels, these input or output levels, I think they are. Yeah, I could see them getting knocked at some stage. One more thing while I was looking around, looking really close, if you look at them, they wriggle backwards and forwards like this, so do these. Now you might be able to see them from where you are, but you might not. But all I can tell you is they have a fair amount of play, even this one. I hate to say it, but on the Fender thing down there, their switches and all the rest of it are substantially better than anything on here. Definitely better. It's a better screen, the Fender thing. Whether the tones are better, well, who knows. I'll tell you one thing, that's not as complex as this. This is complexity gone mad. It's like a mad scientist, I've said this before, a mad scientist that's gone mad and pushed everything into it to try and impress people. And whether it impresses you is another story. It doesn't impress me, because as soon as you go anything other than the most basic thing, well, you've got all this stuff that you don't know about, or maybe you don't know about. I know of some of it, but I don't know of everything. And I don't think Mr. Ordinary User does. As I've said before, I've heard this thing being used, not this one, but being used by some artists. and it can sound pretty good. Yeah, no doubt about that. I don't know how long they've spent on it. It could be 3 days, 3 hours, or 3 years. Who knows? But it can sound good. It's up to you how much time you are prepared to put behind learning that editor, all the other stuff that goes with it, the big fat manuals and everything else. So for me, it's over complex. For you, it might not be. You might be one of them guys, like I've said, that loves all that. Me, I'd prefer to play guitar than play with this. So Tony, what's the score? What's the score going to be for this product? For this device, for this FM3 from Fractal Audio in its Mark II version, turbo. Oh, sorry. I thought it fell off the table for a minute. Yeah, well, the score. I'm going to give it the best score I can give it. Yeah, but I'll give it a 6 out of 10. And we'll go from there. Yeah. I don't think, I can't see me recommending it any higher than that. Great for the guys that want all that stuff, but I think they are definitely in the minority, or you'll have a lot of the owners that have got this product, or got this device, that don't actually use all the features that are included. I think that's an important aspect. And if you're one of them guys out there that's got one of these and you confirm, hey, you know what, you're right, there's far too much in it for me to handle everything. I don't need it, and I don't want the 2,000 IRs and the extra 1,000 that I've got to make myself, or all that stuff, and I can't handle it, man. Just put it down in the text. If you think it's the best thing in the world, well, you could put that down in the text, but be prepared for me to disagree with you, because it isn't. So they're the conclusions, there's the summing up, and there's the score. The only thing left is a bit of playing, and I'm trying to get someone in, a friend I've got, the friend I've got. No, we haven't got a Fractal Audio now. But remember, it's not us that you're listening to, it's the tones. And you can't really argue with that. Because that's why you're buying it, isn't it? The tones. You're not buying it for my playing, are you? Hopefully. You're not buying it for his playing over there. No, of course you're not. You're buying it for the tones. And that feel that they claims inside here from the simulated amps, I've yet to find that feel in this device. I can hear the tones, or some of them, and yeah, they're there, so nearly there. I don't find the feel. It's different. Yeah. So that's it for now. Playing's going to be coming up. What more can I ask for except to say to you, step back from it. If you're an owner, it doesn't make any difference, because the owners are usually quite biased. This one isn't. I'll probably sell it. Who knows? But if you're not an owner, step back and look at what you've seen. Am I making all this up? Until next time anyway, good to see you coming along and having a look at this. It isn't all bad. I'll say that. It isn't all bad. But is it worth £1,250 when there's others around? That's the thought, isn't it? I've still got my Kemper. I've still got my Kemper player. I've still got the Fender. And I've even got, let me just move this, just while we're here, my Pod Express. Is the Pod Express better than the Fractal Audio FM3? Who knows? Find out in another video. Now get out of here.
Wow.